Good evening. Even though me and Anthony Strait, right over here, have gone to a school that has now not made the tournament for 23 straight years, we can still give you sound advice on college basketball. Please just remember that. Otherwise, don't talk to us about that part of it. Just we'll talk about everything else. I'm Steve Rabinowitz once again.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait. And for March Madness, just for advisement, you're going to need a lot of G's.
Yeah. Welcome everybody to It's March. It's not a winter month. It's not a spring month. It's March. That's all I'm talking about. Welcome to the On Sports Line Spring Training Bracketology Pick Your Sport edition. Okay, we have a lot of talking to do here. It's one of the most wonderful times of the year, championship week, and one of my annoying times of the year, talking about pitchers and catchers and stuff that won't even matter for about a month. But baseball is a king sometimes in New York, and we're going to talk about that right now as we do a little pseudo spring training preview. I got new rules. I got them. We're not talking about Grammy-winning artist Dua Lipa, new artist of the year 2019, I believe. But we're talking about the most hated internet man and MLB commissioner, Rob Manfred. We referred to it on our last show back about 25 days ago. But spring training is seeing, it was about 13, 14 days ago, but spring training is seeing the integration of a pitch clock, which pitchers and hitters have been handed out violations like a traffic cop on the Southern State Parkway at the end of the month. Trust me, I know. We also got shift banning and bases that are a little bit bigger than you're used to. You won't see them in the World Baseball Classic, though. So what you've seen now is pretty much the real dress rehearsal a lot of the big stars are going to have before opening day begins. All right, Jay, the new rules have been in place. We haven't heard a lot about them this week. We heard a lot about them last week. Seems to be a very positive connotation to the pitch clock. What do you think about all of these rules in general?
I am in favor of all of these rules. I like the pitch clock.
I love it too. I love it now.
Keeps both hitter and pitcher on task. No more walking around the mound, rubbing the ball or going to the rosin bag after almost every pitch for the pitcher. No more stepping out of the box and adjusting literally everything after every single pitch for the hitter. Yeah, we may get some violations, automatic balls or strikes for delays that could end or extend innings and ultimately lead to a win or a loss, as we've already seen happen in an exhibition game. But as the Athletic's Jason Stark wrote, MLB knew this was going to be a shit show as hitters, pitchers, and even umpires adjusted to the timer. But if it cuts more dead time out of games, bring it on. I like the bigger bases. Anything that brings the running game back. One of the worst things to happen to baseball over the last decade has been the drastic decline of the stolen base. Part of it has been due to analytics having way too much sway over when teams run, in my opinion, making them all ridiculously risk averse. If you weren't a consistent 75% success rate bet or better, you just weren't allowed to run. I get the reason to a certain extent, but it caused one of the most exciting parts of baseball to go away. I don't know about you guys, but I miss seeing a leadoff hitter draw a walk or punch his ground ball through the hole between the infielders, then steal not only second base, but third base, and then score on either a ground out or a sacrifice fly. Bigger bases, coupled with the severe reduction, the number of times a pitcher will be allowed to throw over to first base to keep runners from getting a good lead and good jump, will hopefully return base stealing to the game, bringing about the next generation of Ricky Hendersons, Vince Coleman's, and Tim Raines's, and force teams to control them the old-fashioned way, pitch outs and the strength of a catcher's throwing arm. And finally, you guys know this, I absolutely love that the shift is now dead. You guys know just how much I have hated this thing. Yes, Rabbi, I know your stance on, quote, professional hitters should be able to go the opposite way and hit it through the wide open space on the other side of the infield. But A, going the opposite way has gone the way of the bunt. It's just not taught anymore in the age of exit velocity. And two, pitchers only give pitches that force the hitters to hit into the shift if they can't get the ball in the air. This abomination, the shift was not what those who invented the national pastime had in mind, has turned the game into nothing but 3+ hours of nothing but 3 true outcomes: walks, strikeouts, and home runs. And that is not baseball. Yes, Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine were right. Chicks do dig the long ball. YouTube it, kids. But if too many home runs are solo shots because the table setters are struggling to get on base because things like the simple single up the middle doesn't exist, that devalues the home runs being hit by the power hitters. These new rules will put more balls in play, more runners in motion, force teams to once again value having athletic middle infielders, especially at second base, who can actually cover ground and make plays, and catchers who can throw. Being a true five-tool player who can run, catch, throw, hit, and hit for power will once again matter. I want to see more of the 30-30 player and see much less of the three true outcome player. And I believe these changes to the game will make baseball again.
Also, I think the ones that you said are definitely making baseball again, but I want to talk about the pitch clock more in a second. Anthony, the new rules have been very successful so far. Again, it feels like it's been getting more of a positive reception as everything has gone on. What do you think? Are you more of a purist in this, or are you more for the evolution of the game?
You know what? I'm not going to lie. After watching a couple of games over the weekend with the pitch clock, I'm trying to climb into the pitch clock's DMs at this point. I freaking love the pitch clock, okay? Let me tell you, I went to a Yankee Red Sox game, regular season game years ago. It should not take close to 4 hours for a 9-inning game to be completed, even for Yankees Red Sox standards. I mean, get back to last year in the division series, the Padres and the Mets. The Padres intentionally stepping out of the batter's box at every bat to slow up Chris Bassett, who likes to work fast, who likes to get to his delivery right away to kind of slow things down. I'm just so happy the pitch clock is down. If anything, from what I'm taking away from it, the hitters are being more affected by the pitchers. You got guys like Max Scherzer who do operate kind of quickly. Nestor Cortez is another guy that I thought of right away. He goes into his routine quickly. He likes to get in and out of his delivery. He likes to get his like whatever pitch he wants, gets into it right away. You're not going to see the Nomar Garcia powers that will step out of batter's box and literally adjusting every piece of equipment after every pitch. So I'm like, thank you. Because look, I go to games on the weeknights, and getting back from Citi Field to Brooklyn to downtown Brooklyn at 11:30 at night is a pain in the real end if you ever ride the New York City subway. The bigger bases, I think, is going to benefit guys who probably don't steal as often as they did. And obviously, I'll allude to that later on in the show when we talk about the Mets in particular. But also, it's a safety thing, too, because we've seen far too often, particularly at first base, guys getting spiked and stepped on. But they have to extend and try to get an errant throw and try to complete the out. Like, you see that happen a little too often in recent years. So a wider base obviously gives the runner along the first baseline something to step on without having to step on the first baseman foot, to say the least. But yeah, the rule changes, they sped the game up. I think the average time has been under 2.5 hours. And it's something that baseball has had a problem with, like the game's being too long, even for a 9-inning game. Too many issues with guys taking too much time throwing to home plate, stepping on the batter's box. Then and of course the shift being taken away. It's like, okay, now pitchers gotta make real pitches to get guys out, and now we're gonna see who's really good defensively, because with the shift, you was able to hide your weakest defensive player in the infield. You can't do that anymore. So you're going to see a lot of teams late in games maybe emphasizing more defense, whereas they would have gone away from that to keep the best offensive player on the field late in the game situation. It's going to go back to what we saw like in the 80s and 90s growing up, where you had to be a manager and be more strategic in your substitutions later in games, because now you can't just throw in a guy as a pinch hitter and waste them if you have a poor defensive player on the field starting the game, because you may need that guy to play the field at some point. So these rules, I love the rule changes, the pitch clock in particular, and I'm looking for, and like I said, it's going to be an adjustment for everyone, but I have seen the hitters in particular being more effective with the pitch clock than the pitchers themselves. So that's going to be something that hitters are going to have to adjust to, even after innings. You know, and it was one time Peter
That's
Lonzo
the biggest
scrambled
thing, honestly, because that's for pitchers too.
to the dugout after because he was leading off, so he could have a little more time before his at bat. So, like I said, the first few months is going to be the real test of how these rule changes are going to be implemented and how it's going to affect the games the rest of the season.
I think, by the way, 2 hours, 37 minutes was the number for the first 10 days through spring training. That number will probably get added a little bit during the regular season when the games are a little more mattering and there's more ways you go around it. And that, by the way, would be the shortest pace of play since 1979, by the way, which would be like amazing. One thing I've noticed is it's still the adjustment period. By the way, shift I'm okay with. I've seen the outfield shift though, and if we get into that, then I'm going to get really more annoyed because that's even more annoying than the infield shift. For the bigger bases, I don't notice it as much, but I do think it'll help obviously for solo bases. And yes, I am going to also slide into the pitch clocks DMs along with you, Anthony. It is one of the best innovations. The only things I worry about is adjusting to this rule on the fly. I remember, Jay, you were talking about Max Scherzer and how he was trying to quick pitch everybody.
Yep,
he's already trying to
manipulate it. Yep.
He's already had, and he got caught this, and he basically got called on it the second time it happened, saying you have to wait a second or two for the batter in there. So even umpires are adjusting. And again, I'm very curious to see what happens the first time a game ends on a pitch clock violation, a playoff game ends on a pitch clock violation, or a World Series game ends on a pitch clock violation. The only problem I have is there's a lot of subjectiveness in terms to calling that at a specific time. And obviously, we've talked about it before. You call a game in the first inning the same way you call it in the ninth inning. It doesn't affect that way when we look at it at the end. And watching a pitch clock violation end an important playoff game or ending somebody's season, not something it's something that's going to have to take getting used to.
Yeah, well, Rabbi, that's part of the reason why these are being rolled out from jump during
which it should be, absolutely.
You know, each team plays about 30 exhibition games, whether it's Grapefruit League or Cactus League. And I look at it this way. To me, 30 games for each team is enough time for pitchers, hitters, and umpires to get comfortable with this new normal. That's why they're doing it now.
I think, though, the problem is, as we've always seen in reffing situations, especially in the NFL, you're not going to see every case and scenario. What is it, that one thing? I think it was either Tim Kirchin or Jason Sirk says, you're going to see something different every single time you go to the ballpark. You're going to see something different, especially with all of these new rules every single time you watch a baseball game this year, which I'm excited for. I'm just letting you know that could be an issue going forward. I think there will be more adjusting than we think there will be.
Maybe. And the first time it happens in a regular season game, or costs a team a game or whatever, it's going to be.
We'll talk about it.
Going to be the opening
show.
Well,
by the way,
that's if it happens to the Yankees or Mets.
By the way, it will be interesting to see how the players adjust. Like the players are going to the World Baseball Classic because those rules will not be in.
No, they won't.
Will not be in effect. So when they come back, how long will it take for them to kind of readjust to the new rules after they've had it for a couple of weeks? So that's probably pretty interesting.
That's exactly what I would say, because most of those players are leaving now, and they're going to have to.
It's on tonight, actually. I believe.
Is it really? Oh, wow.
They're going to have to play.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get to Florida, please. I feel like it's a lot colder here than it should be. So let's get to Florida. The Yankees had low expectations going into last year. I didn't think they were a playoff team last year, but after a hot start to the season, a 99-63 regular season, which included Aaron Judge breaking the AL home run single season record with 62 and having the greatest contract walk year in history, you know the deal. But all of that ended with a struggling ALDS win over the Guardians and the first ever ALCS daddy dating ceremony against the Astros in a 4-game sweep. Oy. Let's dive into 3 things we're watching for as spring training moves on. OJ, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the battle for the starting shortstop position between Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Oswald Peraza, and Anthony Volpe is probably the biggest one that the team has had in years. IKF was brought in as a bridge, and the Yankees passed on pursuing a shortstop in the last 2 rounds of free agency because of the faith that they have in both Peraza and Volpe as the future of the middle infield. Volpe, Peraza, and Kiner-Falefa have each talked about how the competition between them is friendly and how they each push each other. Though for me, IKF getting benched in the playoffs in favor of Peraza seemed like the moment where the future became the present, though it's Volpe who is projected to ultimately be the future somewhere in the Yankees infield. Owner Hal Steinbrenner, manager Aaron Boone, and GM Brian Cashman each used the same word to describe how they see the Yankee shortstop position coming into camp. And that word was competition. On paper, makes sense to have IKF battle it out with the kids, but there isn't much reason to believe, at least to me, that Peraza's not atop the depth chart coming into camp. He's ranked number 75 by The Athletic's Keith Law in his top 100 prospects list. And he isn't just a defender with skills that are on par with or better than those of IKF. Peraza also brings a higher offensive upside than the light-hitting Kiner-Falefa. Peraza had 19 homers at AAA in 2022, and then he hit 306 in 49 at-bats after being called up. And to me, that's pretty good proof. Plus, the Yankees signaled a willingness to trust Peraza when they started him in the ALDS following Kiner-Falefa's 3 defensive miscues in Game 3. Now, look, offensively, Kiner-Falefa didn't produce the way he'd hoped. 261, 314, 327 slash line, 4 homers, 48 RBI, 642 OPS. All were pretty much on par with his career averages. But the Yankees had hyped him as an elite glove man when they acquired him at the start of spring training last year in the trade with the Twins. Advanced metrics, however, don't necessarily agree with that narrative. Defensive runs saved ranked him at number 7 among all regular starting shortstop. Outs above average, though, ranked him at 18. Both advanced stats are used to try and quantify defensive value. His .970 fielding percentage was 17th best in baseball. He did make some spectacular plays throughout the season, but he admitted that he tended to second guess himself on routine plays, which is why this is now a prove-it camp for him. Then of course there's Volpe, whom the Yankees told to prepare this offseason as if he had a shot at the starting job. Kid took the advice seriously. He started his workouts at the team's player development facility in Tampa in late November. Said he wanted to be in regular season shape at the start of training camp to best showcase his abilities. Last week, manager Aaron Boone said Volpe will also see some time at second base this spring training, and that's already happened. Here's Boone's quote. "We'll see down the road if we want to get him over to third." Experience, however, is working against Volpe. Though Law has him ranked as the 8th best prospect in the minors, he's played only 22 games at the AAA level, and the Yankees' player development track record would suggest they're more inclined to give him some more time in the minors to get reps at another level. He struggled for the first month at AA Somerset last season before finishing strong. He ended up with 18 homers and 820 OPS and 44 stolen bases. Got him that 22-game promotion to AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre. Dude was over 5 years younger than his teammates on average, and his performance was uneven. He slashed just 236, 313, 404, struck out just over 30% of his at-bats, had only 3 homers and only 6 steals. That said, so far this spring, he's shown that if he did win the starting shortstop job, the pressure wouldn't be too much for him. So far this spring, 333, 375, 667 slash line, a double, a solo, home run, which he led off the game with, and then an OPS of 104.2. He's stolen 2 bases, both in the same inning, and he scored 4 runs. Granted, look, Grapefruit League games are not the same as being in Boston with the AL East on the line in September. But Volpe's given the Yankees a glimpse of what awaits them down the road. Look, I know the Yankees have a glut of it with DJ LeMahieu now healthy, but my money's on Peraza getting the nod as the opening day shortstop. We'll see if Boone agrees with me.
I'm very curious. That think would be the goodbye to Kiner-Falefa for any reason whatsoever. I think it's more of a Joey Gallo. I think it's more of a Joey Gallo-like situation. You want to have him, but he just doesn't fit here right now.
IKF can also play multiple positions. Remember, he won his Gold Glove at third, and he's played some second. So it's a question there. That's why there is still the possibility that Cashman looks for a trade for either IKF or Gleyber Torres, depending on what he's looking to get back. And trading either one of those guys will open things up around the infield? Because remember, there's still the Josh Donaldson question that the Yankees have to deal with.
The question is answered for me. Anthony, what are you looking at?
But Yankees may still be stuck with him come April.
Oh no, I know what the answer is, but it's answered personally in my mind by me. It's what I think of him. Anthony, what are you looking at?
Fair enough.
We got the battle in left field, and let's be honest, Aaron Hicks is the default starting left fielder, but it's going very good. I mean, let's just call it
bad default. I mean, by the way, bad defaults.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he started left field 46 games last year, but he has been. If there is a personification of the angry Yankee fan and having a player that they know that have given him every reason to be upset at, is Aaron Hicks. Look, he had a great 2018. He just not has been able to actually duplicate that after he signed that big deal. Last year, he batted just .216. On top of the fact that he had some really defensive miscues that led to him being on the bench late in the season. And obviously, in the division series, got injured, did not play at all in the ALCS. It was Game 5, I believe, guys. The collision in the outfield, correct? I believe so.
That is correct.
Yeah, so you got like this: the 216 batting average, the 109 strikeouts and 385 plate appearances.
You talk about your 3-outcome player, by the way. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, and that was pretty much Aaron Hicks in 2022. When you looked at the Yankees, they had Joey Gallo, Andrew Benintendi that they got in a trade. Started left field. Yeah, they started Carl Stanley a couple of games. It was just a left field by committee, just to kind of fill that spot. This year, Aaron Hicks, he's made some adjustments as far as how he's handling the bat. Again, he's moving his hands up a little bit so he can swing the bat a little quicker. He's batted 300 in the spring training so far, so he's also a decent start. Even though his first play appearance, he got booed, so that's not the greatest way. You want to start out a spring training.
Based on last year.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got a lot of work to do. But the guy I'm looking at right now is Oswaldo Cabrera, who drew a lot of praise from Brian Cashman last season. Stepped in and played very well in left field, but he's been the Yankees utility guy too. I mean, he plays the infield. He started a few games in right field. He played in center field and played well down the stretch. Only 23 years old on top of that. So when you look at his numbers, he batted .247, 6 home runs, 44 games, had a strong glove, something that the Yankees desperately needed in left field because obviously with Stanton and the problems with his injuries, you probably don't want to replay him in the outfield, but so much. That gives the Yankees some flexibility, but who knows if Aaron Boone likes keeping Cabrera in the infield. Right now, he's also a strong spring trainer, I should say. He's batted .286 with a homer at least in time for the team leading 6 RBIs. You also have a couple of non-roster guys in Willie Cajon and Rafael Ortega, who's actually getting an opportunity to show what they can do. But the pressure's on Aaron Hicks. I mean, this is pretty much his job to lose. When you consider the fact that he's owed $30 million the next couple of years. After let me just double check my notes. After let's see here.
What
after
a bad contract that ended up being, by the way.
But here's the kicker. After August 8th, he can veto any trade due to his 5-year boat rights. So the Yankees are kind of stuck in a sticky situation unless they can pull a magical trade out of the deal. I heard Reynolds coming from Pittsburgh, but that never kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, that never materialized whatsoever. That's what I meant to say. So, like Aaron Hicks, like I said, by default, he's a starting job. But if he gets out to a bad start, in April, I mean, I can see Cabrera kind of being either the go-to guy or definitely being more of the focal point in a platoon of left fielders, for Aaron Boone.
That's a by committee spot, but that's like the Memorial DH spot for the Yankees. It's a by committee every single day of the week. If you don't see more than 10 people in that spot this year, I'll be shocked. It's kind of like if you ever watched Murphy Brown and saw like the rotating secretary that goes on. That's left field.
Oh yes,
that's left field. I'm looking at the number 5 starter role in the rotation. It's going to be between Domingo Germán and Clark Schmidt. What a shocker. Frankie Montas got injured and is now pretty much gone until August. And that's a possible. But both of the guys are number 5 starters. They can easily be number 5 starters. Yes, this is the same Domingo Germán that went 18-4 in 2019 at a 3.61 ERA last year. It's had a decent spring training so far. He's the favorite. He knows he's the favorite because he also doesn't really have any more options to go to the minor league. Schmidt does, but he does have a cutter that he showed off in spring training. Had a good outing against the Braves about a week ago. Got hammered yesterday in his start, but you have a lot of pluses with Schmidt because he can give you the versatility of bullpen or starter. Now, again, so I think Schmidt down would at least give you the flexibility with Schmidt, but the Yankees have not really been an organization most of the time that has cared as much about service time as other organizations. So I feel like this decision is going to be made on who's better. Yes, I think the number 5 starter is something that you need, especially in the beginning of the season, especially in this new pitch clock baseball format, because you're going to need all the pitchers that you can handle. And I'm very curious to see, you can never have too much pitching, not especially in this day and age. So I'm very curious to see what happens with that. And then if Schmidt goes to the bullpen, how is the bullpen handled? Clay Holmes is going to probably close, but Michael King is the star of the bullpen. He can give you an inning, he can give you 2. And Wandy Peralta also just struck out a guy in 20 seconds. And I think all of a sudden that already puts him like way on top of my list for me. If he does that all year and he can get me out of like, if you can get your team out of an inning in like 2 minutes, I think I'm all for Wandy Peralta, the pitch clock and the Yankees bullpen. But I think the Yankees are going to be a very interesting team going into this year. Little quieter than normal, though. We'll talk more about them as we get closer and closer to opening day, which is away. Meet the Mets, greet the Mets. Here's another $100 million from Steve Cohen and see the Mets. After a 101-61 season and a wild card series loss to the Padres after a pretty bad collapse that saw the Braves win the NL East again, the loss of Jacob deGrom was replaced by the big-time gain of Justin Verlander. Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz were re-signed. I can mention Carlos Correa somewhere in here, but let's not talk about that. And we have something called a ghost fork now in town in Japanese import and new Mets folk legend Kodai Senga. This might be a bigger zoo than the Yankees are this year, Anthony, but what do you see as the main storyline to talk about as Mets spring training rolls on?
Well, it's definitely going to be the help of Starling Marte. And you think back to the Mets collapse was in part due to the offense being very inconsistent and at times disappearing entirely. Marte missed the last month of the season, obviously, with the fractured right middle finger. One of many hit by pitches that the Mets had to endure last year. He set the league record for that one. But you look at his slash line, 292, 347, 468, with 16 home runs, 63 RBIs in 118 games. It's the fact that Marte not only provided a good outfielder for the Mets, it's the fact that when he's at the plate, he put the ball in play, which is very important for the Mets offense. Even if it wasn't getting base hits, he did have the most productive outs in the lineup. And then when he went down, the Mets really did struggle. When you had Nimmo and Marte at the top of your lineup, 2 guys who can't get on base, who can't put the pressure on opposing pitchers, you take one of those out, and the Mets became a very beatable and at least easier team to shut down as the season as the last month of the season progressed. But you look at it like this: in 2019, he has not played more than 120 games. Last year it came close, but he's had off-season surgery to give me just a second. My notes are over the damn place tonight. But yeah, off-season surgeries, was rehabbing to start spring training. It's a core muscle, obviously. Yeah, that's all I'm looking for. This week he's supposed to start make his spring training debut. He's not playing the World Baseball Classic, so that's kind of a good news for the Mets. I see if we will get some at bats, maybe get some time in the outfield and trying to get back into playing shape. But Marte is a real big cog in the Mets lineup who still, because of everything that happened in the offseason, still lacking another bat in the lineup. And one of the things with the Mets last year was they didn't hit a lot of home runs, but they did get a lot of hits and they did get on base and off the line and they drew a lot of walks. And Marte was such a big part of that. And when he went down, the Mets offense completely disappeared. In the month of September, has that division lead kind of trickled away and then completely vanished altogether. And then when he came back in the wild card series against the Padres, he clearly was not the same player as far as being able to be effective for the Mets chances. So if Marte could be at least close to 100% of what he was most of last season, that's a big boost for the Mets lineup. Because and I'm quite sure when you guys will bring this up, they forgot to add. They spent a lot of money, but they didn't spend a lot of money on their offense because this lineup is still the same lineup we saw at the end of last season. So,
they did spend money on the. It did spend money on the offense, but that money got injured. So that was it's not like they didn't try. They tried very hard, but unfortunately that didn't come out to be, and that's going to be something that's going to be very looked at. But the one thing that's funny is, unless you're the Houston Astros or maybe the San Diego Padres or maybe the Dodgers, three examples, think I'm done. There's no team with a perfect offense right now. That one more bat is there for everybody. So, but there's no big hole right now in the Mets lineup. You'll see it rake at times this year, but it's a question of whether they can struggle through the hard times. All right, Jay, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the DH situation as a whole, but specifically the right-hand side of the platoon. I spoke about this issue on our Hunt for October show at the end of September, and it doesn't seem like the team really addressed it during the offseason. So as it stands, the Mets came into spring training with the same post-trade deadline DH platoon of Daniel Vogelbach and Darren Ruff. And yet, despite having the same veteran duo on the roster who will presumably share the job, GM Billy Epler wouldn't commit to this platoon and says the DH role is still undefined. Now, the Mets DH spot was a resounding disappointment in the first half of 2022. Dominic Smith and J.D. Davis combined for only 4 home runs, all from Davis, and 24 RBI and 221 plate appearances as the designated hitter. This lack of production forced Smith to be demoted to AAA and Davis to be traded at the deadline. That brought back Daniel Vogelbach. And he seemed to be the answer, at least against right-handed pitching, providing the production the Mets need from the DH spot in the order. Vogelbach has a career slash line of 238, 364, 458 with an 822 OPS against right-handed pitching with 67 homers and 190 RBI. Got off to a hot start when he came to the Mets. He was from July 24 through August 22. He slashed 284, 418, 541. That's a 959 OPS with 4 homer and 15 RBI, which I got to believe exceeded even Showalter and Epler's wildest expectations. He did come back down to earth as the season started to wind down. From August 23 through the end of the season, he only hit 227 with 370 on base, 333 slugging. That's only a 703 OPS with just 2 homers and only 10 RBI. Then in the postseason series against San Diego, he was essentially a non-factor, 0 for 7 with a sac fly in the 3 games. All that being said, Vogelbach more often than not gave the Mets exactly what they needed from him. Went through some cold stretches, but his ability to consistently get on base, hit for power, and provide protection for Pete Alonso in the lineup in the 5th spot in the batting order was evident the entire time. 139 OPS plus, 144 weighted runs created plus during his time with the Mets suggests that he was the massive upgrade they thought he would be. Thus, barring any surprise free agent signings or trades, Vogelbach will once again be the Mets DH against right-handed pitchers. He won't provide any defense or at-bats against lefties, but his ability to flat out mash righties makes him a valuable asset for the team next season. However, the Mets do decide to run it back with exactly the same platoon, then the right-hand side is still an issue because that means it's Darren Ruff, who struggled as the Mets right-handed DH with a slash line of 125, 179, 167. That's a 345 OPS, guys. Granted, it was just a 12-game, 28-plate appearance sample, but it does have me wondering why Epler in the front office didn't pursue any other external options and instead choosing to believe that Ruff can bounce back based off his track record. Granted, he has a career 891 OPS against left-handed pitching, and prior to being traded to the Mets, he posted an 826 OPS versus lefties for the San Francisco Giants last year. Ruff does have that strong record of hitting left-handed pitching over 8 seasons. His career OPS, with that career OPS of 891, and his slash line in that span is a solid 272, 367, 523. On paper, he should be the perfect complement to Vogelbach, who, as we know, torches right-handed pitching, but can't touch lefties. And yet Ruff seems to have left his bat and maybe his heart in San Francisco. Google the musical reference, kids. The Mets do have some other candidates who could see time in the DH role, especially from the right-hand side, including Pete Alonso, though that's strictly for load management to give him half a day off, as well as Tommy Pham, who was ostensibly brought in to be the fourth outfielder, and Eduardo Escobar, who's in the mix for the starting third base job, as both have solid splits against lefties. Escobar, 275, 319, 464 in his career versus left-handed pitching, 782 OPS. But him being the primary right-handed DH is predicated on someone else, Brett Beatty or Mark Vientos, being able to play third base on a somewhat regular basis, allowing Escobar to spend more time at DH. Pham has a career slash line against lefties of 276, 392, 450. That's an 842 OPS, and he has power and handles both right-handed and left-handed pitching pretty well, which could be a very nice option for the Mets lineup. Vientos is the wild card here, but he's an intriguing one, considering he's a homegrown prospect looking to prove that he's ready for the show. Hit 24 homers, 72 RBI at AAA Syracuse last season. His slash line was a really solid 280, 358, 519. It's an 877 OPS, and he was playing every day against both lefties and righties. He got 41 plate appearances in the late season call-up, but he struggled. 167, 268, 278 slash line. That's only a 546 OPS, though he did his first major league home run. Vientos has hit so far this spring 304, 304, 652 slash line with 2 homers, 7 RBI, and a 957 OPS. But I think he needs to show that he can adequately play in the field, either at third or at first, to have a good shot at earning a roster spot first and foremost, then putting him into the mix for the right-handed DH role. Plenty of options to be sure, and hopefully one of them steps up with a solid claim for the right side of the DH platoon, because the Mets can't afford to have another season where that side is a negative in the batting order.
I think he said like 8 names there. I'm not 100% sure. So we're just going to have to throw out one more name to end it. And I'm very curious to see where Francisco Alvarez ends up catching wise on this team. But
yeah, I read up on him, and the prevailing opinion based on what I'm hearing is that
he's probably going down.
Because they don't want him stuck as a DH, because they do see him as a catcher, and they need him getting catching reps at AAA, not getting DH.
All right, so now you've officially mentioned my whole entire angle. Thank you very much for that. But yeah, now the biggest thing with Francisco Alvarez is they pretty much want to keep him as a catcher, but they got Omar Narvaez in the offseason from Milwaukee. Bad 2021, bad 2022, very good 2021. He was an all-star, and he's probably him or Thomas Nido will end up being the opening day starter. I would assume it'll be Narvaez, but and that's going to be one of the huge things, because eventually Alvarez is going to be a part of the team. It's just a question of they want him to be the everyday catcher, but in case of emergency, break glass. He probably should never have been up last year, but they really needed a spark in that Braves series, and they put him right in the lineup immediately afterwards. So there's a lot of talk about what to do with him. He had some ankle surgery he had some offseason surgery, but caught this past weekend. So I think one thing I really want to look at is really just where to put all of the youth on this team. Vientos, we talked, Jay just talked about most of it. And That's going to be the key. And Anthony just said one more bat. You're going to get that one more bat. It's going to cost you about 2 of those guys because, again, as I've always said, bats don't grow on trees. You actually have to either pay for them or
technically.
Well, players with bats don't grow on trees.
There you go. There you go. The bats themselves actually do.
Bats themselves actually do, but not the players.
Players wielding them, not so much.
No. Well, I want to throw this out there, and before we move on, is that you mentioned that the lack of another bat in the Met lineup. The Mets could benefit from the rule change with the bigger bases, because you think about it like this: you have a guy like Nimmo and a healthy Marte who can't steal bases. That could kind of offset the lack of a bat in the lineup if the Mets do decide to go to more of a traditional National League style of play, which is taking more chances on the base paths. And with the bigger base, the wider bases, that could benefit the Mets. Marte did steal 18 bases last year and 47 the previous year, and Nimmo can run. So maybe that would help the Mets with the speed that they have in the 1-2 spot in the lineup before you get to the Lindors and the Alonsos, and of course the Russian roulette of DH that the Mets are going to be trying out in every lineup to start the regular season.
Yeah, and that to me, I brought it up about I'm seeing the potential for the stolen base to make have a renaissance and make a reoccurrence as an actual factor in offenses this season. If it does kind of return closer to the levels where we were used to seeing before the shift and all this nonsense, then you don't necessarily need to have that many mashers in your lineup. You just need guys who can just hit. Because you have a couple of guys who can run, you take advantage of that by combining guys who can hit with guys who can run, and you manufacture runs that way, as opposed to just following the Earl Weaver mantra of waiting for the 3-run homer.
It went for the Guardians last year, so who knows?
There you go.
Work for Earl Weaver. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Now the calendar says it says March. So the ball is tipped, the madness is here. It's crunch time, and now it's you're running for your life. You're a shooting star. So let's now enroll in the class of bracketology as conference championship week is in full swing. First up class, high seeds, currently around that top 4 that we know can move up with good showings this week. This is honestly nice change. This is honestly my favorite part of Champ Week. Really seeing some very good matchups in there that could really affect some teams' futures. Professor Kaplan, step up to the podium and give us your answer of a team that can move up this week after Champ Weekend. Please show your work like a good student.
Yes, sir. I got to tell you, Rabbi, as the pandemic has kind of forced me into working from home, and which gives me the opportunity to actually see not just the later rounds of championship weeks that's played at night, but to see all of the earlier games that are played during the day and experience the full championship week experience. I got to tell you, I understand why you love it so much.
That's great.
In terms of the high seed that I'm looking at, who could possibly move up with a good run at conference tournament, I went back and forth on this before settling on the University of Texas. And a lot of that was based on what I saw them do to Kansas this past weekend in the season finale of the Big 12 regular season. Longhorns are 23-8, 12-6 in the conference, 11-2 non-conference. Their net is 10, and their quads records go like this: 11-8 Q1, 4-0 Q2, 1-0 Q3, 7-0 in Q4. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of wiggle room on the one line, guys. Kansas, Alabama, Houston. I think they hold their 1 seeds no matter what happens to them in their respective conference tournaments. That 4th number 1 seed, however, that may change hands between now and Selection Sunday. I mean, Purdue had it when the committee released their top 16 in the middle of February. but the Boilermakers have struggled down the stretch, going 5-4 in their last 9 since the calendar turned to February, including losing twice to Indiana and barely escaping with wins in their last 2 games against Wisconsin and Illinois. UCLA has taken it as we head into the conference tournaments on the strength of a convincing win over Arizona Saturday night, and how much better their metrics are than Purdue's. The Bruins do rank higher than the Boilermakers in net, KenPom, BPI, Sagarin, and strength of record. Purdue only holds the edge in KPI. UCLA also now 16-4 in quads 1 and 2 compared to 15-5 for Purdue, and they have one more road record than the boys from West Lafayette. Rutgers' late season free fall makes the Purdue home loss to the Scarlet Knights look worse than anything that's on UCLA's resume. The Bruins also beat Maryland on the road by 27, while the Boilermakers lost to Maryland by 14 in College Park, which makes giving the Bruins that 4th number 1 seed the right move right now. Though if Jalen Clark's right foot injury proves to be more serious and Purdue wins the Big Ten, things could flip. However, all of this, as I said, also has me wondering if Texas can come in and steal that 4th number 1 seed by winning the Big 12 tournament, regardless if they beat Kansas along the way, though beating them in the tournament championship game after closing out the regular season by beating them convincingly in Austin would definitely make a statement to the committee about the Longhorns specifically, who are number 10 in the country in net rankings per Warren Nolan, and the Big 12 in general, which has been the best conference in the nation pretty much all season long and are number 1 in conference net rating, again, per Warren Nolan. Guys, if you haven't checked out his site, warrennolan.com, you should. There's no better collection of metrics, quad breakdowns, and team sheets anywhere. Texas, like Purdue, only 5-4 since the calendar turned to February, with 6 of those 9 games coming against ranked Big 12 teams. But that's more about the strength of the conference than an indictment of Texas, though giving up 75 points or more in all of these last 4 losses is not a good look, nor is spotting your opponent a big lead and attempting to come all the way back. The Longhorns' 75-73 loss at TCU in their penultimate regular season game is the latest example. If the Longhorns are going to give themselves a reasonable chance at snaking that final number 1 seed from UCLA, Purdue, or anyone else, it'll start with them getting back to playing the stingy type of defense we've known from them all season, and we saw on full display in the win over the Jayhawks. Alongside the Big 12's top offense, Texas led the conference at 78.8 points per game. They allowed only 68.7 differential of 10.1, and they are the only team in the conference that had a better than plus 7.5 differential. Second in offensive rating at 110.3, 4th in defensive rating at 96.1. That's a conference best 14.2 plus net rating per 100 possessions. They also turned the ball over less than any team in the conference, only 11.8 per game, and second in assists in the conference at 16.6. Look, this is a team with a terrific NCAA tournament resume. That 11-2 non-conference record includes wins over number 9 Gonzaga, Creighton, who snuck back into the top 25 at number 24, and a pretty decent Illinois squad that is ranked number 33 in the net. The Horns are very much worthy of their current number 2 seeding, and I don't see them losing it even if they don't have a deep Big 12 tournament run. But if their backcourt of all Big 12 first teamer Marcus Carr and Big 12 Sixth Man of the Year so Jabari Smith can lead them to the conference tournament championship, that may be worth a bump up to the 1 line, especially if UCLA, Purdue, or anyone else in that conversation doesn't go as far in their conference tournaments. The Big 12 getting its 2 best teams on the 1 line come Selection Sunday. Anyone surprised by that hasn't been watching near enough college basketball this season.
And Texas is could be the first ever 1 seed with a coach who is still coaching for his fucking job, and Rodney Terry coming in after Chris Beard got fired in the beginning of the season. Give him the permanent job, Texas. What are you doing? What are you doing, Anthony? Let's talk about the Zags.
Yeah, it's kind of rare that this is one of those few years where we're not talking about Gonzaga being one of the number 1 seeds overall. But Gonzaga, when you look at the Bulldogs, they've had one of the tougher out of conference schedules and managed to still scrape out with a 12-3 record. So you add that to obviously 25 overall record and 14-2 within the conference. That's pretty much a strong resume. And the fact that, but one of the things that would hurt Gonzaga, at least as far as moving up, was the fact that they did have a 500 quad 1 win-loss record until they was able to beat St. Mary's, who was obviously higher in net than Gonzaga. they were able to beat them, got a share of the West Coast Conference regular season title, and they actually played later this evening against San Francisco in the WCC semifinal. But they
It's at
moved up in
11:30 p.m. by the
yeah,
way.
11:30 tip-off time.
They're playing
So,
the second game in that tournament because St. Mary's is the one. So it's an almost non-existent thing for Gonzaga to ever play second in that Vegas tournament on that Monday night.
but the thing is though with Gonzaga is that they're playing the best basketball at a good time. In the last few weeks, they moved up 4. They moved up to the 3 spot according to Philadelphia's bracketology, and they have a good chance that they win the conference tournament. And depending on what happens as far as some of the teams that are ranked at number 2 at the moment, they can easily find themselves in 2 in the West region. I think they're pretty much stuck there. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they stay at the 3 or even get a chance to go to 2. But they did a good. They have positioned themselves where they can't fall no further than the 3rd spot. So Gonzaga right now, it's all in front of them. They just have to win the tonight, obviously, and win the conference championship game and see what the chips fall when they made. We see a couple of upsets in the tournaments this weekend. I think it's like 6. I think like 12 1 seeds have fallen so far in conference tournament play this weekend alone. So we're seeing it's only Monday, and we're only seeing kind of the wackiness that is March Madness, and it can actually benefit the Bulldogs in having a number 2 spot in more likely would be the West region come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I was looking at their team sheet. I mean, the thing that we always, everybody likes, and I think we're finally at a point, guys, where we stop using the West, the WCC conference slate against them, and it's about damn time.
They may have a conference, a conference title in that large team.
Right. I mean, they're 11 and their non-conference record is 11-3, and you look at who they've played. Beat Michigan State, lost to Texas, beat Kentucky, lost to Purdue, beat Xavier, lost to Baylor, beat Alabama. I mean, these guys aren't shy about playing anybody and everybody. They'll take on all comers, and they're at the point now where, scheduling well out of non-conference is becoming more and more a thing that committee looks at. Gonzaga's been doing it for years. And, it kind of, I think, helps them even in a year like this year where, we're not looking at where they really haven't been in, where we're used to seeing them, as Anthony said, in the number 1 overall seed conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing is they're just eventually you're going to kind of regress a little bit to the mean. They're not as strong as they were in previous years, but they're still going to be a hard out in the tournament. I don't think this is going to be the team that's going to be their first NCAA tournament appearance, but who the hell knows? Okay, there's one answer to this question. Y'all have struggled for days on end being like, oh, this team. The answer is Marquette, and it's a very simple reason why. For the love of God, they are right now the number 6 team in the nation. Let me repeat that, number 6 team in the nation. The last time that they were that good was 1978 in polls. 1978. Wow. They announced the Big East first teams. They have 3 on the first or second team, Cam Jones and Oso Ighodaro. I believe I said that correctly, Jay, if you've watched him before. I believe so. And they are on the second team. And then on the first team is the guy that is probably going to be getting some more hardware at the end of this week. And that's Tyler Kolek, who, by the way, Anthony, a George Mason transfer coming into the Big East and lighting it up this year. Pretty much averaging 12 and 7 a game. He is running the point like crazy. Marquette now, as I said before, we don't take Joe Lunardi's bracketology as the gospel. We take it as a guide. There's some places that have Marquette as a 2. But let me show you this resume, and I'll tell you, Marquette right now is a 3 in Lunardi's bracketology. That's great. Here's something. Here's Marquette. Here are Marquette's losses this season. Let me give it to you. They've only lost 6 times. One was to Purdue, a team that's been a #1 ranked team all year. One was against Mississippi State, not the greatest of losses. One was an OT loss to Wisconsin. One was a double overtime loss at Providence. And then the last loss that they have had, they've had two, I'm sorry. One was at Xavier, who is going to be a top 4 seed in the tournament. And one was at UConn, who was also going to be a top 4 seed in that tournament. And I love the Big 12. I love the Big 12. I think they deserve all the praise this year. Me and Jay have talked about it, but Baylor is currently a #2 in this bracketology over here. In November, on Tuesday, November 29th, Baylor played Marquette. Obviously, if Baylor's ranked higher than Marquette, you would think Baylor would have won that game, right? They lost that game. Baylor did 96-70 to Marquette. And so what reason in the world should a team that beat another team by 26, who has a comparable resume, and the Big East has about as strong of a top 5 than any conference does in the country? Now, if you go to the other half of the conference, it's not that great, but Marquette has not lost any bad games pretty much this entire season.
No.
They are by far the best team in a loaded Big East conference. Why is this team struggling for a 2 seed when we should be talking about them possibly being that 4th #1? That's how great of a year Marquette has had. And I got to give Shaka Smart some credit. He knew what he was doing, leaving the dumpster fire that was Texas, for him at least, and going over to a school that appreciates what he's doing. And he is building a winner basically by using the transfer portal at its best, at its most easy, at its best. And transfer portal has changed the game of college basketball, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen teams out there like Houston who's used that effectively. Alabama has used it effectively, and Marquette has used it effectively, and you're seeing them. I would love to see them get that trophy at Madison Square Garden, cement themselves a 2 seed, possibly the top 2 seed, and maybe even be in the discussion for a 1. I mean, no one's really earned that 1 spot as of yet. Why not them?
No, I mean, and honestly, Rabbi, they have 1 loss outside of quad 1, and that was a 3-point loss to Wisconsin back in December. I mean, you brought up Mississippi State. That's a quadrant 1 loss on a neutral court. That's not a bad loss by any means.
And that's probably their worst loss of this season.
Yeah. And that was only a 3-point loss.
I just don't understand I know the bottom of the Big East has not had the greatest year. Once you get that below Creighton, it becomes a little murky, having the Georgetowns, the DePauls of the world. St. John's is a mediocre team. I'm not going to throw them into that conversation. They almost beat Marquette this weekend, but that's probably the reason, and that's kind of not cool, especially because of the fact that Arizona is also a 2 seed, and they play in a much worse conference, and they have about the same record.
Yep. Marquette's worst loss this year, Rabbi, was that 87-72 loss to UConn at the beginning of February. Other than that, this is one of the better team sheets that I've looked at, coming into conference tournament week. Look, does the Big East, is the Big East going to get the same amount of cred as the Big 12 or the SEC
or the Big 10? No, Big 10 is a 10-bid league right now, possibly.
Right, but at the same time, the Big East has had anywhere, of various points during the season, they've had at least 4 teams in the top 25. It's a good league, and you know what? When you're the best of the best coming out of that, if they come out of that league with the conference tournament champion, Rabbi, I can't fault your logic in saying they have an argument to be that 4th #1.
And we'll see them. They'll be a very interesting play this week when we go into the Big East tournament. All right, boys and girls, let's go to the bubble, as we call it. It's the Jay Kaplan's favorite teams section of the draw, unfortunately. Sorry, Jay. Let's start with you going close to home, right on Dean Spitz court, right over there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't expect to be looking at the University of North Carolina.
I don't think anyone did.
Situation. I mean, their numbers and their metrics are bubble worthy. 19-12 overall, only 11-9 in a down ACC. Their net is 49. Their quad records are as follows. They're 1-9 in quad one. That one quad one win was the win over Virginia recently. 6-3 in quad two, undefeated, 6-0 in quad three, and 6-0 in quad four. I mean, and this has easily been the most frustrating season of Tar Heel basketball in my lifetime of following and covering this bluest of blue blood programs. Armando Bacot, Caleb Love, RJ Davis, and Leaky Black reached the 2022 national championship game. All of them came back to Chapel Hill. Their average age is above 22. They were joined this season by a 23-year-old Northwestern transfer, Pete Nance, who replaced Brady Manick as the starting power forward. Bacot was an overwhelming choice as the preseason ACC Player of the Year. Love and Bacot were both selected to the preseason All-ACC team. The Tar Heels are a veteran team loaded with talent. They are also in serious danger of being the first preseason number one to miss the NCAA tournament since North Carolina State in 1975. Being swept by Duke this season is more than just giving their most hated Tobacco Road rival bragging rights. It's the latest example of UNC's pattern of play this season. In a game they absolutely had to win, they shot 5 of 23 from beyond the arc and lost at home to the Blue Devils by 5. Accuracy from the perimeter has been an issue all season, and I'm going to get into it more in a minute. But because of that, UNC might have to make a seriously deep run in the ACC tournament in order to even reach the first four. ESPN's Joe Lunardi had UNC as one of the first 4 teams outside the field prior to the Duke game. UNC's metrics, net, strength of record, KPI, KenPom, all in the 40s or even 50s across the board. That's not a place where Tar Heel Nation is used to living. The 1-9 record in quadrant one games is bad enough, but the Heels are also 2-10 against teams currently projected to make the field of 68. This is an experienced rotation that has come up short against UNC's strongest opponents all year. The flip side is that North Carolina's ability to take care of business against every other opponent might be the only thing keeping this team in the bubble conversation at all. Against teams not on track to earn an at-large bid this season, Tar Heels are 17-2. Look, obviously there was so much more was expected from UNC this season, but one huge difference between last season and this season is North Carolina has really struggled, as I said earlier, to make perimeter shots. I mentioned it briefly earlier. They went that 5 for 23 outing against Duke from beyond the arc. They're last in the ACC in three-point percentage in conference play at 30.2, which is really bad when you take the 6th most attempts. Davis is the only regular rotation player hitting threes at better than 34%, and he's barely there at 34.4. Nance, who hit 45.2% of his 3.1 attempts from downtown last season at Northwestern, only hitting at a 32.7% clip at about the same number of attempts per game this year. Love was at 36% from deep last season on 6.6 attempts per game, but he's barely over 30% this season on 7.3 attempts per game. Another big difference, UNC's pace of play. Relative to previous Tar Heel squads, this is the slowest paced UNC team I have seen in years. Now, while they still play at a fast tempo compared to most teams, there have been glaringly fewer fast break opportunities and thus a lot more half-court possessions than last season, which has posed a challenge for this season's offense, which has been egregiously deficient in both player and ball movement in half-court sets. The Tar Heels' inability to, at times, to A, get post touches from Bacot either on the initial attempt or on reposts, and 2, reverse the ball in order to force the defense to move and create open looks and easier shots has cost them games they should have won, such as both games against Pitt, as well as the second game against NC State. Can the Tar Heels still make a run in the ACC tournament and get themselves on the right side of the cut line? Sure, if the version of the team I saw win 3 in a row after that loss to NC State is the one that shows up. That said, this is not the position anyone saw this UNC team being in coming into the ACC tournament. Many people who cover UNC insisted they knew that this team never should have been ranked number 1 in the preseason. Even I was skeptical. I wasn't fully convinced, but I was cautiously optimistic that their play from last March could carry over with so much experience returning. Look, granted, maybe the Tar Heels shouldn't have been ranked number 1, but I thought even the most skeptical and or cynical folks saw this team possibly missing the NCAA tournament entirely. The loss to Duke moved them from first 4 out to next 4 out on Lunardi's bubble watch. North Carolina could miss the tournament 1 year after coming within 4 points of winning it all. The Tar Heels' chances are hanging by a thread as they head to Greensboro. As bad as things got this season, I never thought the Tar Heels would be here.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, this team really accomplished the tournament last year because they were an 8 seed going into the tournament last year. They didn't really, that was really the only time they've ever really accomplished anything. And they need to win probably twice. They're going to need to win that game, which is the third game, I think, on Wednesday against either Boston College and Louisville, and then they need to shock Virginia. And
they've done it once.
They did it once.
And Virginia's trending in the wrong direction coming to Greensboro.
Yeah, Virginia in any postseason is always trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah. They need to bare minimum, Rabbi. I agree with you. I think they
need to get to the semis, and even if they get to the
final four of the tournament in order to even have
and even if they get to the final four, if seeding holds, Clemson would be that next team, and you can't lose a game and where the other team is looking also to get into the tournament too, because it's like, hey, apples and oranges.
That's the thing. They're like an NFL team who is in the hunt but needs a crap ton of help.
The Raiders apparently. Sorry, I haven't thrown a Raider joke.
Always good to do a Raider joke. Anthony, who are you looking at?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the Utah State Aggies in the Mountain West Conference, and they've actually moved into the bracket according to some of the latest bracketology, including Joe Lodani's on ESPN that I was just looking at 5 minutes ago. And I made the joke that the guy's literally up to mid like a sports sticker on this thing. But
this year, this week you have to be.
Yeah, but the thing with Utah State is they have a great resume. They're 24-7 overall, 15-6 in the conference. But then we look at some of the net ratings. It's actually in the top 25. They're actually they stay in the 20s. That actually helps them out. 25 and KenPom is actually higher than you just mentioned. North Carolina 20 spots higher as far as quadrant records. They have a 10-5 record in that category. What hurt Utah State and what was pretty much keep them out of the tournament was the fact that they did not have a quad one victory under the belt. That changed after beating Boise State this past week. And again, they desperately needed to boost that resume up because they've done a great job in the quad 2 games at 8-1 and across 15-2 in the bottom quadrant of those games. The non-conference play, they've beaten 3 teams that have won regular season conference championships in Utah Valley, Bradley, and Oral Roberts. And beating 3 teams, New Mexico, Colorado, and UNLV, that are also on the bubble. So they actually have a decent resume. What could hurt them is that quad 1 record, just being 1-4 overall. That could actually hurt them. And the fact that they do have 3 double-digit losses, one against Boise State, Nevada, and San Diego State being the other 2, that could be held against them as well. They don't play till Thursday because they have their conference tournament starts a little later this week, but they have to do a good start. I would say they have to get at least 2 victories to really put them in solid ground as far as the selection committee. Just being able to get into even one of the first 4 games would be a great accomplishment for this team. That they got the ball rolling, beat Boise State. That was the game they had to have if they wanted any outside chance to really impress the committee. Now they just have to string together a couple of victories in the conference tournament, and I think they have a good chance of getting in.
Yeah, Anthony, I'm looking at their team sheet, and it's interesting. The splits. The splits with, granted, losing twice to San Diego State isn't great, but I mean, San Diego State is ranked 16 in the net. That's not a bad loss. Splitting with Boise State, there's nothing wrong with that. Nevada's a tough one. I mean, the loss what's interesting is the loss is considered a quad 1 loss because it was on the road. The win is considered a quad 2 win because it was at home. It's interesting how the quads break based on home versus neutral versus away. You're right. This is an interesting team sheet. But I agree with you. They're going to need to they're going to need to make a semi decent run in the Mountain West tournament if they're going to have a chance to to stay in that potential first four conversation.
I'm not sure if Michigan is ever really going to. Michigan was in this exact same situation last year, and that's including Hunter Dickinson, who is the all-world everyman for this team in terms of just getting buckets and getting points when needed. But Michigan's been to five consecutive, Sweet 16s or better, not counting the year that there was no tournament. And again, Michigan is once again on the bubble. They're going to play Rutgers, a team that has been, as Jay mentioned earlier, free falling fast this season, and that game might be for a bid. 3-9 quad one record, 4-2 quad two. But if you look at the losses outside of a game in Arizona State back in November that they lost by 25-ish, and that is about it, I think. Yeah, and they lost at Penn State by 22. Every other loss is single digits. Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Michigan State, Iowa. And then the hell of how their last two games went. Losing in 2 overtimes at Illinois and losing in overtime at Indiana. Oh, yeah, after winning against Wisconsin at home, also in overtime. So if Michigan gets in the tournament, though, we've seen what Juwan Howard's boys can do. They can make a run. And the Big Ten, it's weird because outside of Purdue, there's no team who's probably worth a damn really in the tournament. And you may not pick any of them to win a first round game. But if you look at the consensus, Purdue obviously is going to be a top 3 seed. Northwestern, and good Lord, Chris Collins has done such a good job in there, is easily going to make the tournament this year. We don't have to see Julia Louis-Dreyfus every 5 minutes in the crowd this time. Indiana's got a decent year. Izzo, March, Michigan State's going to be in there. Maryland has had some good wins. Illinois has been there, and Iowa's also going to be in there. And if their seeding is too low, Fran McCaffrey will just stare at the committee and basically get exactly what he wants. So the Big Ten could get 10 teams in the NCAA tournament, but only 2 of them are currently ranked in the top 25. Welcome to March. Welcome to just the Big Ten in general.
Yeah, here's the thing, though.
It's so frustrating.
Right. I mean, Rabbi, that's the interesting thing about the Big Ten. They're the number 2 ranked conference in the nation in terms of net rating. They have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that have a net of 40 or better. But it's like in terms
they're
of
all mediocre,
right? No, I mean, none of them, Purdue jumps out at you, or on the on their record jumps out at you. But as I said earlier, they're trending in the wrong direction. They're 15-5 in the conference, but you got Indiana and Northwestern 12-8, Michigan and Maryland and Illinois and Iowa and Michigan 11-9 in that area. Penn State, Rutgers 10-10. The middle of the conference is pretty bunched. So to say that anybody could come out of this conference is no joke. The interesting thing for me is I'm very interested to see how Indiana going to continue to trend in the right direction. Trace Jackson Davis is having just one hell of a season carrying that team. How far can they go out of the Big Ten?
I'd rather just see Caitlin Clark really than anybody else.
Oh my God. I mean, how much did you want to be in Iowa that weekend? You had we talked about it, Rabbi. The men's basketball team comes from behind to beat Michigan State in overtime. And what was it, Rabbi? What'd you tell me? How many points was it 19 points in?
It was coming back from 13 down with 90 seconds left to go.
Yeah. And then Caitlin Clark on Sunday hits the game winner against Indiana. I mean, what a weekend, college basketball weekend in Iowa.
How interesting is it that college basketball this year, your number 1 seeds in the women's tournament could be South Carolina. That's normal.
No surprise.
Virginia Tech and Iowa could
Yeah,
be
go
number
figure.
one seeds,
Go
both
figure.
winning the ACC and Big Ten. All right. They don't teach you how to transition into this, so I'm just going to transition into this by saying, finally, hard to transition into this. But Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant, who's been the NBA's darling for years, now leading a franchise to new heights, has taken a leave of absence. It was supposed to be at least 2 games, but it is, as of right now, indefinitely from the team due to a series of related incidents, all involving guns, which escalated to the final one happening on Friday night when Ja was at a club on Instagram Live flashing a gun. What are you doing? What are you doing? Denver police is now, by the way, looking into that incident, and there could be some criminal charges coming in here.
Yeah.
Anthony, what's your opinion on this? Why do you think he's doing this? And does this really hurt his future? He's one of Nike's biggest clients right now. They have a shoe named after him. There's not a lot of people who actually have that inventory right now in the NBA.
I will say this. I really hope for Ja Morant's sake, not the basketball player, the young man, the number 23-year-old, that someone sits and seriously talks to him and tell him he needs to slow down. And I say this because I grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood, and the lifestyle that he is embracing is the lifestyle you work hard as a kid to escape. And I don't know the people he's surrounded himself with. I see his dad at games all the time, and I've read up on his read up on his past history. His sister played college basketball also, by the way. It seemed like a good young man, great good head on his shoulders. He's a young dad too. He has a 2-year-old at home. And yeah, and obviously you think about the fact that he is living a dream that he worked hard to make come into fruition. And just making just boneheaded decision one after another. It's one day to be tough on the court and the bravado, but when you put guns into consideration, and look, I'm not one of those anti-gun individuals. Like, that's your right. If you want to be a gun owner, do it the right way. Get registered. Be responsible. That's your business. But when you bring in guns into the equation, you putting not just putting yourself into harm's way. We think about the incident in Indiana with the laser pointing and the alleged allegations of him threatening a 17-year-old with a gun, and now this over the weekend. I mean, he's a public figure. You actually inadvertently putting your family in danger as well, and this is something that a lot of young people in his position don't realize. And I'll harken back to what Stephen A. Smith said over the weekend. Yes, the NBA, they do provide security if you need it, if you want to go out and go about your business, and they do have and they do keep an eye on the players as far as their behavior. But like if I'm listening to Ja Morant, like listen to the Jalen Roses, the Matt Barnes, the Steven Jacksons who had these experiences as far as wrong place, wrong time, or even just being very lucky that a bad situation didn't get worse. He really does need to just take a step back and just look around and just realize maybe think about who is he surrounding himself with moving forward, because you definitely don't. I think about Allen Iverson and the bowling alley incident where he was there, and because he was the biggest name, he was lumped into it. And you think about a district attorney who wanted to make a career. You don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You don't want to get caught up in some foolishness because of someone else in your circle. But more importantly, you're putting yourself in a position you don't need to be in. And I really hope he takes this time away from the team to focus, not just focus on himself and his family, but to really have a stern conversation with people that he trusts, people that is going to have his best interests at heart. And he's got to be smart. I mean, look, you're 23 years old. You have a family. You have a young girl who needs her dad in one piece. Those are the things you have to be thinking about when you are a young man, a young adult growing up, and especially in the public eye, as Ja Morant is. I mean, yes, you're living the dream, you're a basketball player, but the 23-year-old man has to be the number one priority, because I think if you get to him, the man, the basketball player, it would be in a better place, in a safer space. So I really hope Ja takes this as a life lesson and can really just learn from it and move forward and just continue to grow as an adult, because this is not a lifestyle this is not a glamorous lifestyle. And we've seen a lot of celebrities over the years, particularly we've seen rappers, we've seen athletes put themselves in positions that they don't need to be in. And like I said, congratulations, you work hard. You work hard, and you're living a dream that many people don't get to have. And a lot of people work hard to get away from that kind of a lifestyle. You don't need to embrace it. You don't have anything to prove. You work your butt off. You just need to be the best young man and the best grown adult you can be for yourself, your daughter, your dad, and mom and sister, all together. So I really hope Ja can learn from all of this and move forward.
Yeah. I only started reading up on Morant's situation, this morning. And once the rabbi texted me that it should be the closer for tonight's show, which I wholeheartedly agreed with, I dug deeper, and the more I read, the more concerned I got with who this 23-year-old multimillionaire NBA star is surrounding himself with, and that he's putting himself in situations, as Anthony said, that have really bad optics, not just for him, but the Grizzlies organization, the NBA, the city of Memphis itself. Focus of 2 NBA investigations in as many months, linked to multiple incidents allegedly involving guns. The one Rabbi mentioned, that happened at the club where he appears to be brandishing a gun. The incident in his home in July where he and a longtime friend allegedly beat up that 17-year-old kid after an argument during a pickup game. That same friend walked out onto the court and directed expletives at multiple Pacer players during a game at the end of January. You got another alleged incident at a mall 4 days after the one in his home, in which a security guard says Morant threatened him. If you include the incident after that Pacers game, where members of Morant's entourage allegedly yelled at and then pointed a red laser at members of the Pacers traveling party that one of their security guards said was 100% attached to a gun, and count the deleted tweet from May 2022 in which he told a fan that, quote, "It's free to see how hollows feel" during an online spat. Morant's had 3 situations in the past 10 months in which guns were purported to be part of the conversation, and a 4th, the one at the mall, that was threatening in nature as well. The Athletic's David Aldridge had a great piece on Morant on Monday, where he wonders out loud where the support system, the real support system, is for a young man who appears to be headed down the wrong path. And Aldridge's story includes the following passage, and here it is. Morant looks like someone who is struggling mightily with life despite his on-court success and fame, and whatever his support system is, it isn't helping him enough. There doesn't seem to be anyone in the rarefied air of NBA stardom, guys like LeBron, Steph, Jimmy Buckets, Luka, Dame, PG-13, Kawhi, the Joker, Embiid, Giannis, guys who understand what it is like to live in and play in that rarest of rare air with all of the demands and demons that live there pulling at you. Guys who can tell him with some authority and credibility, dude, you're bleeping up, or at least, hey man, hooping is important. Trying to be about that life isn't. We all need that. A friend, a colleague, someone you respect and love because they don't have their hand in your pocket and because they care about you, someone who won't lie to you. And no one is better equipped to have that real talk with Morant than his NBA brethren. It's a brotherhood, we're told all the time. Okay, well, now would be a good time for some of the game's stars to keep it 100 with their struggling brother, nephew, cousin. And now Aldridge also writes that, in here, the quote is, "It may shock you, but even maybe especially rich 23-year-olds are not known for their cogent decision-making. But, as I read further, I think Kyle Kuzma may have summed it up best when Aldridge asked the Wizard forward what he would say to Morant if he were able. And here's the quote: "Man, it's tough. I just feel like as Black men in our country, especially us in the position we have, that we're blessed to be 1%ers, right? We're blessed to have, in this case, a show deal, $200 million on the horizon. And I think a lot of time we're figures, but we are role models too. We have to realize that everybody, every kid, everybody in general, they're watching us. It's just unfortunate. I know when I first came into the league, I had all my homeboys around me back from the city, Kuzma being from Flint, Michigan. We had great times. It was very important to keep my homies around because I grew up with them, right? But if my homies are just yesing me and not allowing me to be my best version of myself, are they really my homies? It just sucks, man. It definitely sucks, man. It's all about your circle. You got to keep your shit tight. And I don't think you can sum it up any better than that. If Morant's inner circle isn't telling him the hard truth that he's screwing up, and if he doesn't get himself right, which I hope this time away from the game allows him to do, he could lose everything that he's earned so far. Then he needs to change who is part of that inner circle. He's worked too hard to get to this point to have people who may not truly have his best interest at heart being the ones that are too much in his ear.
I just shocked by the whole situation just because of the fact that everything has just come fast. Everything in this has happened this season. Everything. The Pacers thing happened in February. And that was, I think that was during when the team was, and it happened while the team, I believe, was struggling in that 9-game losing streak that they happened. Obviously, games mean nothing here, but it does seem like there's a coincidence that and then comes that other incident happened back in September, but that came to light after that. And then just what you did doing what you did that Saturday night. It's not just unbecoming of a star and a guy who, again, has a chance to become the face of this league as the LeBrons kind of fade away a little bit. Durant is in his older age, and then eventually going to get to Ja, it's going to get to Luka, it's going to get to this new generation of players, and he's one of them. Or he may not end up being one of them at the end of this thing. He might put himself down the wrong path. And I think just the escalation of, okay, this is one thing, okay, this is one thing, okay, this hasn't been proven, to what we see now is kind of surprising. Again, not a signal of an upbringing here that leads to this. So this is just a bad support system around him right now, and just a very, very fluent situation. I think we'll learn more as everything goes along, and now all of a sudden he is in this little bit of a bind legally with this Denver investigation coming in. I hope we can see Ja, at least for his own mental health, back on the court this year, but it might take a little more than that. We're going to have to see what goes on, but it's not tragic yet, but it does have the makings of something that might be more tragic than that.
Yeah, he has some hard questions to ask and answer, and some hard choices to make in determining who he keeps and who he lets go.
And the funny thing is, he kind of just put himself in a situation to have to ask himself the hard questions. Again, this wasn't a thing 2 months ago, which is just shocking to me.
Yeah.
All right. Now, words are never my thing that people say, so I have to at least coherently get this closed, right? So, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. This has been On the Sports Lines. We'll be back with you next week as we preview the NCAA tournament. YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines on demand. Did I get that right, Jay? I think I got that correct. Mm-hmm. Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines live. I got that right, yes. And Jay, take us home.
All right. Our Twitter handle is @ONTH Sports Lines, where you will find the link to this show tomorrow, along with other tidbits of sports information and stories that we think are very much worth your while. Rabbi, before we sign off, I need to wish a very, very happy birthday to my now 10-year-old niece, Miss Harmony Eve Petrilli. I'll see you Sunday, Squish.
Happy birthday.
Guys. Happy birthday. Have a good night, everybody, from On the Sports Lines. And remember, follow our brackets and then pick the opposite. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.